Prayer position. In the previous video, I briefly demonstrated what I'm going to call prayer position or praying position. It's basically just kneeling, but with our elbows supported on a surface, in this case, the bench. And in this position, we are more relaxed than when we are in quadruped or when kneeling without a support. And therefore we can maintain a good flexed, neutral, stable position like we're always training in. But this time we're more so able to emphasize the protraction of our scapula, and therefore the flexion of our thoracic spine, and our ability to access and inflate our posterior rib cage as we inhale. So I'm taking several breaths here to stabilize and own this position, be stable in it, before I start extending at my hips as I do so here. And I'm doing so as I exhale, because in order to do so without extending my spine, I have to release the tension that's pulling my hips into flexion. So I inhale, posterior rib cage, expanding, pressurizing, then exhaling, releasing tension in my hips, hip flexors, to allow my pelvis to move closer toward the bench without extending my spine. Now you can see I am allowing my scapula to retract a little bit as I move further into hip extension. Of course, we're trying to avoid this, but it's quite challenging, as you'll find. Now, I would definitely emphasize maintaining a protracted scapular position over anything else, and I am doing a pretty good job, but I can of course do better. We're not setting full hip extension as our goal necessarily yet. It is a worthy goal, but that's not necessarily the point of this exercise, at least not this variation of it. In a moment, I'll show another variation where we are better able to extend our hips fully without compensating at our shoulders. So here we are again, same position, but now with a higher surface in front of me, my body will be more upright, and therefore my shoulders will not be supporting the weight of me as much. So it'll be easier for my scapula to remain open, protracted, and I can move further into hip extension because I'm not starting from a forward-leaning position, at least not as much. And so same deal, finding stability in this position, breathing and relaxing before I start moving into hip extension. And again, I'm doing so during the exhale. This is when we release the tension in order to allow our anatomy to move freely into end range of motion. I'm not trying to contract any muscles to push me forward toward the chair. I am letting go of the tension that's not allowing me to do so easily. On video, it's probably difficult to see any movement at my hips, at least in real time. That's because full hip extension is a very hard range of motion to own, or to have the capacity to maintain with stability. And I'm certainly lacking in hip extension. So that's why I'm not trying to force myself into it. I'm letting it happen gradually, over time, all the while consciously reaching forward with my elbows in order to further protract my scapula, in order to allow me to continually access this posterior rib cage to expand upon inhale. So, as is the case with all of our stretches and training positions, these are multifaceted. We're training the whole body at the same time. And so now that I've achieved, for me, what is full hip extension, I have the option of challenging it further by then flexing at the knees, thus lengthening all the tissues on the anterior side of my body and challenging hip extension to an extreme degree. This is just a novelty, really, but perhaps has some practical benefit and worth trying at least to see what you're capable of. And so lastly, same idea, kneeling on our elbows, but now we're going to go into full hip flexion, which is going to look akin to a prostrated position, truly a praying position. But in order to do so without extending at our spine, it demands maximum hip flexion. And so again, this is not something that we're trying to rush into, but just another avenue in which we can train. So same idea, reaching toward the ground with my elbows to emphasize protracted scapular position without shrugging my shoulders upward toward my ears. Always maintaining the capacity to breathe into my posterior rib cage, maintaining thoracic flexion. And now, as you can see, as I go into full hip flexion, my whole spine goes into deeper flexion. This is acceptable because it's moving as a unit. I'm always maintaining the integrity of my spine. And the more flexed our thoracic spine is, the more we can expand when we breathe. So good luck.